Hello, America. It's weird out there, isn't it? Yeah. Even this. Is this throwing you? I looked like Colonel Sanders. Now I just look like a fat, pudgy doughboy. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we need to change as a people, as a conservative movement. We're not really known as the best in the artsy world. You know what I mean? We might be good entrepreneurs, and then we just do it, and then we just don't pay attention, and it all goes to crap. That has to change. We have to get more creative and more entrepreneurial, because the reality is that the blurring of government, big tech, big finance, left-wing ideology has created an entire woke industrial complex. And that complex does not tolerate any kind of dissent. They don't like it. You either play ball by their rules on everything from climate change to transgenderism to vaccines and abortion, or you're out. That reality has been growing now for the last 20 years, slowly at first, and now it is moving so rapidly you can't keep up. I felt these shifting winds when I first suggested we start BlazeTV, an online news network. Everybody said that was crazy. Well, crazy like a what? It was the first place you could go with major talent. We put it online. We broke the network system and also showed talent and viewers you don't need to go to the networks. Hello, Ben Shapiro. Hello, Megyn Kelly. Hello, everybody else that has a big name. The networks are so incestuous and corrupt. That world is not really a place where you can really say what you felt all the time. We were the pioneers. You were the pioneer in this concept before it became known as the parallel economy. You proved it could be done. That when a system rejects you because of, your views or whatever, you can continue. You'll thrive outside the system. That's what terrifies the media so much. So much has happened in the last 11 years since you helped launch BlazeTV. In that time period, we've seen big tech, especially the major social media companies, become the gatekeepers of speech. Speech they didn't have a problem with when they came to us, literally sitting in my office in New York going, hey, really, you got to get your listeners on this because it's great. It's going to be great for you. Really? This gatekeeping is a growing threat, and not just to conservatives, but for anyone that disagrees with the government and their power. There are certain trigger words now that I can't say on this program if I want it to air on YouTube. Like I can't even tell you the title of my new book. Can't do it. Just last week, the Babylon Bee experienced another cancellation, and in a way, this one is even more frightening than getting banned on Twitter. They're still banned on Twitter for a joke in which they awarded the U.S. Assistant Health Secretary Rachel Levine as their Man of the Year. Twitter says it'll lift the ban if the Babylon Bee will just delete their tweet. The Bee CEO is like, I don't think so. Now suddenly, and without warning, the Babylon Bee had their email service terminated by a company called Front. Just a reminder for the humorless left, Babylon Bee is a satirical website. They don't really give Man of the Year out, nor does the New York Post. Imagine The Onion. They'd be like us banning them from social media sites. Imagine National Lampoon back in its heyday having their phone service disconnected or their printing service canceled, not because they weren't paying their bills, but because someone thought that their jokes were dangerous. America, this is where we are. When you start to see somebody cancel on social media and then their email service cancels, is there going to be something else? How about the bank? This is the new system the left wing is creating. And our left-wing corporate overlords are doing their best impression of Soviet-style censorship. If this insane left-wing crusade continues at the current pace, half of the country will be soon locked out entirely from the economy. So what do? I mean, I'm locked out of all the banking system. What do I do? That's what Russia was just facing. And what did they do? Oh, they created a parallel economy. They created their own banking system. Oh, what do you do when you're just a citizen and Citibank cuts you off and all the other banks? Well, we better figure it out, because sooner or later, we're going to need an alternative bank. In Australia, starting in 2025, Bank of Australia will not give you a loan if you buy a car that runs on gasoline. This is something the New York Times said no bank is ever going to do this like 3 weeks ago. Starting in 2035, California, and announced today, Washington State, will ban the purchase of gas-powered vehicles. The insanity we used to all laugh at in places like Europe has fully invaded America, and then we've taken it up a couple of notches. Now, there are some signs of hope with things like the University of Austin, which has the radical goal of teaching truth. Yeah. Then one of our sponsors, Patriot Mobile, it looked at the mainstream cell companies and their political activism, and they decided we should create an alternative, because nobody knows about the left's activism through your cell phone company funding abortions. But everybody knows about Patriot Mobile and their activism. The left will make sure of that. How about RightForge? This is an internet infrastructure company that aims to provide an alternative to Amazon's web services. That is fantastic and so needed. Peter Thiel is one of the major investors at the forefront of the parallel economy movement. His new business ventures include a conservative film festival, a conservative dating app, a new firm called Strive Asset Management, both of which you're going to hear about a little later. But critics say that the right is, you're just building your own echo chamber. Do they notice that they're in an echo chamber? Not us. They say the fact that we're building this is an echo chamber. You know, it kind of betrays the total misunderstanding of the circumstances. It's not that I want to create an echo chamber. You kicked me off the networks, so I started my own. And you said, good, why don't you go on the internet? That's where. And now you have a problem because we're successful. People just want to participate in regular, normal American economic activity without being flagged for not believing in pronouns or wanting to use energy that actually works, you know? And by the way, as this parallel economy grows, unlike the left side of the economy, I think we welcome just about anybody to participate. You don't have to be a conservative to enjoy the parallel economy. You just have to have common sense to see the actual value of freedom. Tonight, I wanted to put together some good news for you. Talk to some of the innovators who have had enough of the left's intolerance and are the first ones stepping out on this new moonscape and taking risks. And they have started to put an awful lot of money into building out alternatives. I want you to hear directly from them about their ventures, hopefully draw inspiration for how you can participate in building this parallel economy. All right, I want to talk to you about Relief Factor. Do you have pain? Hi, I'm a doctor. Well, I play one on TV, but I actually have my, it's not an MD, it's honorary. Close enough. I could do surgery on you, but I could take you right out of pain if you'd like to do that before I operate. I would suggest writing a prescription right now on a pad that doesn't exist. You want your life back? This doctor says Relief Factor. I got my life back. If you're like me, you should get your life back. You know what I mean? Relief Factor, not a drug, but developed by doctors. They say they're different than an honorary doctorate, but I don't know. You can get the 3-week quick start. Try it now for $19.95. 70% of the people who try it go on to order more. You want a drug-free, natural way to get your life back? 1 out of 1 doctors right now will tell you it's Relief Factor. ReliefFactor.com. All right, I want to introduce you to our first entrepreneur. He's founded several successful companies. Past 2 years, he's kind of been a little hot on the ESG and stakeholder capitalism. Also, not a real fan of identity politics. Well, he's decided to use his own experience in finance so he could start a brand new firm called Strive Asset Management, which is helping lead the charge in the parallel economy movement. Welcome back, Vivek Ramaswamy. How are you, sir?
Good to see you. How are you?
I'm very good. There's days that I just think we're going to win. And then there are other days I'm thinking, no, we're way behind the left. I think the problem is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, we didn't think that America would ever really truly go insane and we would need all of this stuff.
Yeah, look, I think that part of this came from a culture of complacency for a long time. I agree with both things can be true. That I think we're going to win and I think we're way behind.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Glenn, it's because there's been a tripwire thrown into the dogmas of actually even the conservative movement in this country, where the conservative movement had been taught for years to recite slogans memorized in 1980 saying that the free market couldn't do no wrong, where what the other side realized is that you could actually take over the so-called free market and use that as a vehicle to advance ideologies that could have never passed through the front door via government. So in a certain sense, it's not surprising that, as you say, we're behind. It's in part because the tactics of the progressive movement said that we're done working through government alone. We're now working through the private sector itself, through some very complicated mechanisms that you and I have talked about before. But at the end of the day, I think that's why the conservative movement, broadly the American movement, fell behind. But the good news is I think people are starting to see it. People are starting to wake up, in no small part due to efforts of people like yourself. But I think that the first step is awareness. The second step is acting on it. And that's what I'm working on.
So, it's interesting when you look at the conservative movement. I've always been, just very libertarian in these companies, do what you do. And I was never afraid of the companies. But that's when I thought that they were just so evil they only cared about money. Then somebody convinced them they can make even more money if they do what they're doing. And you get to look at Disney as an individual company. All right, if that's what Disney wants to do, I think they're stupid. But that's the free market there, isn't it? That's not what's happening. Explain the difference.
That's not what's happening at all, Glenn.
Right.
But as I often say, the free market is not free to fix what it is not free to fix. At the end of the day, you have to actually take the constraints off of these companies to be able to allow them to pursue their self-interest. I'll tell you what I mean. So if you look at who Disney's competitors are, okay, let's say Disney goes on this one-sided transgender education campaign across public companies, across public schools across the country, and gender identity and the whole 9 yards, pushing for that agenda. That should have created an opportunity for Paramount Pictures, let's say, or Universal Studios as a theme park. Now, why is it that Paramount Pictures and Universal Studios didn't seize on that opportunity? After all, there's great surveys that said over 60% of Disney's own customers were put off by their decisions. By the way, survey respondents included mostly Democrats, just like Disney's customer base. Why did these other companies not pursue it? This is a big part of where I'm focused. It turns out that the top shareholders of Paramount Pictures, which is Paramount Global, the parent company, of NBC Universal, which includes both GE and Comcast as its ultimate parent companies, are the same large shareholders as the largest shareholders of Disney. Companies like BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard. And what these companies do, Glenn, is that there's a concentration of capital, $20 trillion in the hands of just those three firms alone, that are effectively like the puppet masters behind the scenes. They're pulling the strings and effectively mandating through soft power that these companies adopt these one-sided political agendas. So is that the free market where companies are free to do what they want? Not quite. They're being told by a small concentrated group of actors that are actually doing favors for the government behind the scenes to direct the behaviors of corporate America. And I know that sounds conspiratorial. It is not a conspiracy theory. It's a reality hiding in plain sight. It's not even hiding because many of these institutions, these financial institutions, even boast about it.
So, Vivek, the actual biggest shareholders are the people, because those three firms are using most people's retirement funds or your state's retirement funds. Your state is investing so it can have more money in different funds. That means we're the largest shareholders.
That's right. It's the everyday citizen. And even when you say the state is nothing more than the constituents and the people
Correct.
who live in that state.
Right.
This is something that state officials sometimes forget. State pension fund managers, I've met many of them, by the way, Glenn, they sometimes forget is they think they bear the illusion that because they're a state bureaucrat, that they're investing their own money. They're not. They're investing the money of everyday citizens. And the problem right now with American capitalism is that you have a small group of institutions, financial institutions like BlackRock, that are taking the money of everyday citizens, but investing that money and voting on behalf of that money and advocating on behalf of that money in ways that most of those everyday citizens, the actual owners of capital, do not agree with. And that's what threw the tripwire into the system of free market capitalism that you and I learned back in the 1990s. This is not that. It's like Dorothy told Toto, we're not in 1990 anymore. That's the problem we need to fix. Okay,
so you just said $20 trillion in investments. That is, money doesn't talk, it screams. You could take away some of that money, but let's say you have 25 billion. Is that even going to make a difference and a dent? And if so, how?
So I think we got to be strategic about this, Glenn. I'm talking about, so I founded Strive. We're a new market actor. We're competing with firms like BlackRock. But the course of action that we take, you got to be strategic about it. Pick the sectors that you want to start with having an impact in, where the people who work in those industries are already waiting to go in the classical direction of focusing on products and services for profit rather than on social agendas or ideologies. That means you're probably not focusing on trying to use capital to change the behavior of Silicon Valley. Maybe Hollywood, Elon Musk could have taken a shot at that at Twitter. But if you take a sector like the U.S. energy sector, and I've had discussions, including in recent weeks, Glenn, with top oil and gas executives, with top employees in the oil and gas industry. Most of these employees, including CEOs, including board members, including executive C-suite members, they want to be drilling more, to be fracking more, to be doing whatever allows them to be most profitable over the long run without paying attention to someone else's imposed Paris Climate Accord agenda. Yet they have to. They've had those handcuffs put on by their large shareholders. So I think that if we can be strategic with respect to starting to drive change in industries where the employees already want to run in that direction, then even a smaller asset manager can give cover to those boards, to those CEOs, to those employees to run in the right direction. Then with that wind as a sail at one's back, you can then go to other industries and drive change there. So strategic thinking is key.
How are you going to get these companies money? If they say they want to drill, right now they can't get the money to pay for the drilling and the prospecting and everything else.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Glenn, but some of this is actually, it's a cycle. So what happens is, if you have handcuffs put on the oil and gas sector, so let's say you have shareholders that show up and say that, you know what, you need to behave in accordance with the Paris Climate Accords. You need to ultimately get to net zero standards by 2050. You need to stop drilling, stop fracking. Then it turns out that actually a lot of the projects and investments they had made in the past then go to waste. The cost of capital then goes up for those firms, which then makes it even harder to raise money from other people. So this sets a cycle into motion where one way to think about this is if American energy companies have an amazing opportunity to provide oil and natural gas to fill an energy supply-demand imbalance, then that's an amazing opportunity. Well, if they're not behaving internally like they can capture that opportunity by drilling and fracking and investing internally accordingly, then investors apply a lower multiple to their company's stock prices. They value them at lower prices, which then in turn makes it much more difficult to fund those companies or for those companies to raise external funding going forward. So in a certain sense, the mandates drive a cycle that actually makes it harder for investors, for those companies to be even raise money from other investors. So it's a sort of a death spiral the way I look at it.
So let me take you to California and what Washington State said. They're making a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the state says that gasoline cars are not the future, we're not going to sell them, it really dogpiles on everything. How much does that affect? I mean, California plays a big role in influence, don't they?
That's right. And so in a certain sense, this is actually the best argument from the other side. What they're saying is that this is the way laws are already going, such that if private sector companies in the energy industry don't automatically move to net zero standards, to borrow Larry Fink's words, he's the CEO of BlackRock, he says, you're going to go the way of the dodo. Okay, that's the best argument they make. And that's what reveals how nefarious this arranged marriage really is, Glenn. It's the merger of state power and corporate power to together do what neither one of them could do on their own. You see, if you just used government power, well, wouldn't. At the end of the day, most voters in the democracies that determine the outcomes in most states do not want to adopt the same measures California does. But the fact that California does it then provides cover to CalPERS, the California State Pension Fund, to then tell large asset managers that they have to drive this through the boardroom, which then makes it a national phenomenon. So you have to see through the fact that it's neither state power nor just corporate power. It's a hybrid of the two that together is far more powerful than either one alone. That is, I will remind you, I know I don't have to remind you, but I will remind you, is the classical definition of fascism. I know. The merger of state power and corporate power. That's what we're watching.
So let me play their side for a second. Well, it's killing the planet and we can't have these emissions, and so we got to get off, and we're just going to reinvent the world. How does this hurt the entrepreneurial spirit and the creative spirit to be able to come up with something new? Why does this hurt that?
Well, it's a good question. And so there's so much to say to that. But the most obvious thing is, let's take a specific example. So a company like Chevron, great American oil and gas company, speak of California, they have operations in California. They were forced in 2021 to adopt what's called a Scope 3 emissions cap. They didn't want to. Their board recommended against it. But BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard all voted in favor of it. And so the proposal carried majority support. And what that requires is a great American oil company like Chevron not just to reduce its own emissions, but to reduce the emissions of anyone who even uses their oil all the way downstream. Oh my God. Including the costs of their employees who commute to work. So that means Chevron as a company is required to take responsibility for, say, an Amazon Prime truck that delivers food to someone's house. Well, why is that a problem? If taken to its logical extent, it means that a company like Chevron literally, I think, cannot exist in the way that it does today if it has to take responsibility for reducing customers using its own product. Why would it ever be in the interest of a business, an entrepreneur with a smaller business or a legacy business like Chevron, to say it's in my interest to force my consumers to use less of the core product that I make? That is a fundamentally anti-growth measure. It is fundamentally a measure that is opposed to human flourishing delivered through American capitalism. But the cherry on top, Glenn, is that it's not even good in the end of the day for the environment or for the alleged effects of climate change. Because when Chevron drops these projects, some firm in China or Russia gets to pick them up, who actually has even worse and dirtier production with methane leakage and everything else, that even if you buy into the climate religion's core claims, you would still say that's actually a worse course of action to take to externalize that to a place like Russia or China. So it loses on every count.
Final word. That's why I think it's just not a bad idea. It's somebody's good idea to cripple the West or America. Is that crazy to say?
It's not crazy to say. I think that actually China is really enjoying the ESG phenomenon in the West. It undercuts the legs of the West at a time when actually America is at a competitive disadvantage already. And you know what China has realized is they can use market entry to their big market as a carrot to get companies to dance to their tune. So it's not an accident, Glenn, that BlackRock does not apply its ESG standards to Chinese companies, but gets a license to be an asset management business builder in China and make a lot of money there doing it, while they're applying those ESG standards in the United States that cripple American energy companies. So this is a geopolitical tool. It's a Trojan horse. They've used capitalism as a Trojan horse to undermine America from within. China is the biggest beneficiary at the end of the day.
Vivek, thank you very much. If you have any kind of retirement fund, you have any money in one of those three firms, may I suggest you move it and look at Strive. It is traded on the New York Stock Exchange for oil and gas, DRLL. Back in a minute. All right. Let me tell you about another company that was built by some entrepreneurs, and it was built by a family. It's American Financing, and we need more of those companies. If you're smart, and I know you are, you're concerned about where your money is going right now. How much money are you spending a month? How much are you spending on rent if you're renting your home? How can you save more money? Well, if you're renting, maybe you consider buying a home. You might say, well, I don't have good enough credit to get a loan in today's standards. Well, there's a lot that American Financing can do to help you get that credit rating up in as quickly as 30 days. Give them a call today, find out what you have as far as assets and what you have as liabilities, and see if they can help you get those liabilities and those obligations down to give you some breathing room during these times. Call them now, 800-906-2440, 800-906-2440, or AmericanFinancing.net. You may find this hard to believe, but I've actually been out of the dating game for a while now. I know, ladies. I know, it's sad, isn't it? It didn't occur to me that this left-wing takeover of everything in the economy and culture is a very real issue for conservative singles looking for a date who isn't crazy, somebody who's not a trans member of Antifa that also works at Planned Parenthood. Apparently hard to find. But my producer, who will remain anonymous, alerted me to this problem and showed me what conservative singles have to deal with. These are some actual screenshots sent in by an acquaintance of my producer trying to use a well-known dating app. First, you've got to figure out your gender. Quote, pick which one describes you. Intersex man, trans masculine, man and non-binary, cis. I don't know what half of these mean. Then there is the lovely potential match, a trans and queer law student who will give you extra points if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race. Well, I'm out. This next candidate says, quote, what would be super hot is if you donated to an abortion fund of your choosing and slide into my DMs with your receipt. Not lifting a finger otherwise. No. Then there's a non-binary, trans, feminine, transgender, and a bunch of other things person who also happens to be married, but non-monogamous. Okay, that's good. And then there's this person who just asks, please respect that I'm a pre-op trans. So there's a lot of normal options out there for the average traditional values-leaning conservative. Joining me now is Daniel Huff. He was an advisor in the Trump White House and a former counsel to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. Now with the backing by Peter Thiel, Huff co-founded a new dating app called The Right Stuff, which launches next month. That's insane. Is that really what it's like all the time for conservatives?
I actually think it's worse because the examples you gave were of antagonism against conservatives by users of the app. But you also have antagonism by the platform itself. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For a period of time in 2020, Bumble, a major dating app, one of the most popular, required that users affirm support for Black Lives Matter in order to use the app.
Wow.
And this was an absolute requirement. It wasn't, note something here. It was literally, there was a landing page. You had to press a button. You couldn't get past it except that you did. So that's a very clear example of the platform bias. Another example, you have Hinge, very popular. Hinge is constantly, to this day, pressing users to add their pronouns to their profiles. And in fact, we like to say in our app that you get profiles without pronouns. Another more subtle example is that many of these profiles, the apps are designed in a way you can add stickers showing interests. So for example, I like to hike, I like to kayak, but there's also political ones, except all the political ones are left-wing. So it's, I'm a trans ally, I support BLM, I'm, you know, pro-choice. There's no sticker for I'm pro-life. There's no sticker for Second Amendment rights. There's none of that. And so you have the antagonism, the discrimination against conservatives, not just from the fellow users, but from the platforms themselves. And the one other thing I'd add is that you were giving anecdotal examples, excellent ones that are represented. And I give a lot of talks on these things, and everywhere I go, people are telling me stories that happened to me, it happened to my sister, it happened to my friend. But there's also, in addition, empirical evidence. The study was done by Axios in 2020, and they found among college students that 72% of liberals say they would not date a conservative. The reverse isn't true. Similarly, AEI did a study finding that I think 69% of liberals would not want a conservative to join their family. So you have anecdotal evidence, and you have empirical evidence, and you have discrimination against conservatives, not just by users on apps, but by the platforms themselves.
So what was it that originally brought this to your attention? Was it somebody else? Are you single, or were you single? What was it?
I was, and my co-founders were, and I think it was a combination of personal experience, anecdotal experience, and the empirical evidence that I cited. So it sort of happened to us. We asked around about it and found that it was a wider spread problem, and then found empirical evidence as well. And I will just say that I think I may hold the record for the shortest date ever. When I was working at the White House, I was at a place called Mission in Washington, D.C. Woman came to meet me that I actually met on an app, and sat down, got a really nice glass of wine. She was pressing me for what I did, and I told her, well, you know, I work for President Trump in the White House. Well, I said that, and she upped and left faster than we got out of Afghanistan. And the net result of that was that I had this untouched cup of wine. So I called a friend of mine. I said, what are you doing? Why don't you come by? We'll have a cup of wine and talk some things over. So it was fun, but it also really, you know, impressed upon me that this was a real need. And then later, you know, when John and I had left the White House and we were thinking about what to do, we looked into this a lot more and found that there was a real opportunity and a real need.
All right. So tell me what your thoughts are, because conservatives will date somebody, you know, that doesn't, I don't want to be in lockstep with somebody and it's, you know, us against the world. But talk to me about your thoughts on continuing to divide us. There is a product that is needed, and so you're doing the right thing to serve the public. But how do we get out of this to where we're not just half this way, half that way, or is it too late for that?
Well, you know, I think about that quite a bit, and I think you're right to ask the question. But I think the short answer is that it has been mathematically shown that the way to the optimal solution, the Nash equilibrium to a repeat game, is a tit-for-tat strategy. So what I mean by that is, if you figure out there's two sides and one side can cheat and one side can play fair, they look at this mathematically, and you can actually prove that the best thing to do when the other side is cheating over and over is to adopt a tit-for-tat strategy. And you do that for a little bit, and then in the long run, the other side learns not to cheat. So yes, it's regrettable that we have to do that, but I do think that the way to respond right now is to build those other things, because the left kept saying, oh, you don't like it? Build your own. So, all right, well, we'll build our own, and we're going to make it not just as good, we're going to make it better. And once we do that for a little bit of time, I think that could hopefully bring everybody back in a united way. We don't want this to continue, but again, as I said, I think mathematically it has been proven that the best way to deal with a situation like this is to do it back to the people who started, do it well, do it for a little bit, and then in the long run, it all evens out in the Nash equilibrium.
Are you having any problems with, you know, cloud service or anything like that? Have you had that start yet, or been threats of it?
So what we've done is we've actually taken great pains to be as independent as possible, to have as few dependencies on cloud servers as we can. And so far, that's served us well. So I think so far, fingers crossed, we've been in a good spot. But I think conservatives overall never expected that we would be in this position. So you really have to think what might happen, what could go wrong. And again, that's where we've really tried as hard as possible to eliminate as many dependencies as possible, so we're not in a situation where we're caught flat-footed.
So tell me the one thing that sets you apart, because you're not the only one that tries to appeal to conservatives, but you probably are the best funded one with Peter Thiel behind you. What makes you different?
Well, I think that does matter. No one's really ever tried to make a high quality, well-funded app with a dedicated team. Those are, I think, the three things that really help us get to where we're going to be. The things that also set us apart, there's two, right? So John McEntee, our founder, was at the White House, pretty well known, tremendous conservative network. When you deal with an app, one of the most important things is driving adoption, and he's well positioned to do that, far more well positioned than many others. The second thing, which is probably of even greater importance, is for too long, conservatives have been playing catch up with liberal tech. So, they have YouTube and we have Rumble, they have Twitter, we have Truth Social, various other ones. What we need to do is to actually just get ahead. We want to not just catch up, we want to create a superior product. And we're able to do that by actually adding features that no one else has, which is something, again, that sets us apart. As one example only, we have something that we've created called Post Date. Whereas a lot of these apps have you sitting at home swiping, what we want to do is get people out on fun dates. So we've a section of the app where you can go on and post something fun. Hey, I've got 2 tickets to the Red Sox game, first base line, who wants to go? And other people can see that and they can say, hey, I want to go. I'm a big Sox fan. Look at me. They can take videos, they can send messages, and the individual who posted the date gets to pick who he or she wants to take. And so that's, again, a great way of getting people out on fun dates rather than just sitting at home swiping and sending messages. And we've got a lot more creative things like that coming. And I think that's another thing which distinctively sets us apart.
Well, best of luck. And thank you, Daniel, for all of the hard work that you guys have been put in, and also the money that you guys have put into all of this to help create a parallel economy. It's needed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And folks can go to joinrightstuff.com to sign up. And I just want to quickly close by saying I saw you speak at CPAC, I think it was 2 years ago, and displaying your historical artifacts as part of your speech, the things you purchased. It was a tremendous speech. I still remember it. I really appreciate it. And so it was really a great honor to be here. And I don't mean that in a perfunctory way.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless. Back in just a minute. So I'm skeptical by nature. And so when somebody said, we can steal your home. Sure you can. First of all, it didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand I didn't understand that the titles of our home are kept online only, and there's only one gatekeeper. That's insanity. And that nobody was watching it. So somebody forges your name on a title, it comes out of that digital vault, and their name goes into the digital vault. Nobody's really even noticed it, and they can do whatever they want. All of a sudden, 2 years down the road, are you a squatter? Because you don't own this home. It's really bad, really bad. HomeTitleLock.com is a company that is watching the title, and they are using the promo code RADIO right now. Enter your address for your free, no obligation home title scan. That's a $100 value and is absolutely free. Just see if you're already a victim. HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. So I started this program tonight saying that we need to be a little more artsy. And this is my favorite segment because Eric July, you probably know him if you watch the BlazeTV. He's a libertarian, he's a musician, he's a commentator, and now he's a comic book creator and comic book company creator. Welcome.
I appreciate you, man, having me. Yeah, that's a mouthful. I got to kind of clean up my bio.
Did you ever think?
No. No. This is just the stars aligned in the way that it did.
This is the prime example of capitalism.
Yes.
There's a hole in the market. I look at, I go to these movies. I used to love Marvel. It's way over the top now. And they're only preaching a message, it seems.
Beating the audience over the head. The great Stan Lee talked about this, and the way he worded it was that he wanted to put even social issues underlaying the plot.
Sure.
They never wanted to feel like the audience was being beat over the head. And it is the complete opposite, not just with the comic book media nowadays with like movies and stuff, but specifically in the comic books. There are a bunch of activists masquerading as writers that now work for these companies. They've infiltrated these companies, and they're just using characters that people know and love as a vehicle to kind of preach whatever kind of weird sort of leftism it is that they preach.
Is there no loyalty at all to not just the character, but to the audience?
No, and I think that's what happened when you got this mega kind of corporate entities that were in control of these properties, is that there's such a disconnect. It's basically IP farming at this level, and now it's just a bunch of, again, creatives that they don't answer to the customers at all, and protecting or the sanctity or rather the legacy of a lot of characters, that's not even on their list of things.
But why?
Pay
Because I mean,
attention to.
Disney now owns Marvel,
Yep.
and you would never see a transgendered Mickey. I mean, maybe you will, maybe you will.
That's right, you'd
but
be
they understand the value, or always have understood the value of that timeless character, and they're just destroying these. But it's made a huge hole for you.
Yeah, most definitely. We kind of, came in. I had an idea. I said, you know what? I'm gonna put a couple $100,000 of my own money and just go for it. I've been a commentator. I've been a customer, long-time customer. I've been knowledgeable talking about this stuff. And I said, you know what? Instead of always griping about the problem, let's be a part of the solution. And look, I'm gonna be completely honest. With almost $3.5 million later, I thought about this several ways. And I didn't think it was going to go that way. I figured we'd see success. But $3.4 million in a month, or we hit the $3 million mark in a month, we hit $1 million in 30 hours. That was not on my list of
right. And that's success. For sales. So
yes,
how many magazines?
So you're talking, we have almost, I think, over 53,000 total books that are accounted for. Now we have other things that are obviously up for purchase, but that's a lot of books.
But 53,000, the number one seller last year was?
In graphic novels, 24,000. Yes, we
doubled. That's a hell of an introduction.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. So what do you hear from the other company? Do you hear anything? Are you still,
yes.
Are they pretending you don't exist?
Well, they're either going to do that, or the ones that have talked about us have either wrote hit pieces on us. That's to be expected. And people that are big members of like the mega, like the big access media, comic book guys, they have spoke about us, and it's always been negative. Because what it is we built our own little sandbox here, and they hate that. We didn't go through them in terms of not just how we're going to do our content, but also from the business and economic perspective, how we do distribution. This was a purely organic thing here. I didn't pay any money for really advertisement or anything. I just said, hey, here's the product. Hopefully you'll support us. And because we didn't go through what they deem as the proper channels, they don't like that. They look at it as a threat to their little old guard here. So either they're going to ignore it, or the ones that do speak about it, it's not objective.
Isn't it crazy that this is being slammed? Anytime anybody wants to go outside of the system, they are slammed for it. But this was the promise of the internet. You're old enough to remember. Mm-hmm. I am too. When it first came up, it was like, you'll be able to create anything. You won't need a gatekeeper anymore. You'll go right directly to your customer base. And now it seems even that the people who run the internet don't like that.
No, that's the true threat here. I think this is what they were always scared that folks like us, especially entertainment, were going to catch on to. I believe that right now we're operating on a very old, archaic model in terms of how we do entertainment. And to see how we did it, and I had a direct line of sight with my audiences, what the internet allowed me to do. Instead of having to even go through another publisher or anybody, I just say, you know what, we'll just do it. I can speak to my audience directly. Why do I need to answer to some like middleman, especially when I don't really understand why they do what it is they do? And that was the big thing of what we did. Instead of just, hey, everybody else does it this way. Everybody else goes through Diamond for their distribution. Everybody goes through this publishing house if they're going to produce like an independent comic. And I said, why? That was really the question. I said, why? I couldn't. So it didn't make sense. So I didn't do it. And that I got my hot takes here and there. I'll make some of them here on the Blaze.
Yeah.
But I've never gotten as much backlash as I ever had in my entire career in commentary or anything that I've done than I have by simply starting my own comic book.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
And you know, it takes somebody from the outside, I think, or somebody who hasn't been trained for years and years and years in that industry that can sit there and look at it from the outside and go, that just doesn't make any sense anymore. You know?
There's so many parallels with this in the music industry as well, and what I've dealt with. And like everybody, in terms of even how they're labeled, the deals are structured, it's like it doesn't make sense.
No.
But nobody seems to ask the question, why? It's just, well, it's the industry standard. That's what everybody does.
I was called to Nashville 12 years ago, and big executive in one of the very largest record companies calls me in and said, okay, you just broke the mold for television. How can we break this? Because this isn't working. And they explained it to me, and I knew pretty much how the music industry was working. And and I made some suggestions, and he was like, no, because we have this, and this. And you're like, well, that's why someone will clean your clock.
Yep, and that's all it takes. It usually just takes some guy that says, you know what, they're doing it the way that I don't think maybe is the most efficient. Maybe it doesn't make sense. It's not as beneficial to the creatives. So how about I just not do it that way and we do our own thing? And so many folks, just from even other creatives, just were coming in and looking at what it is that we're doing. And I really think we're on the brink of something special, not saying just with the Rippaverse stuff, because inevitably speaking, somebody's going to take what I did and maybe clean it up, make it more efficient, and explode as well. Hopefully we enter into a more decentralized age of entertainment, because to me, everybody wins. There's more variety for the actual customers, and people, the creatives, can benefit more from their work.
Sure. I don't know if I've already asked you. I think I have. I need the first copy.
I got you.
For the museum.
I got you. You of course, you got one.
Because that's this. I think this changes everything. It changes everything, and it couldn't happen to a nicer group of people than those guys, done by you. I love it.
I'm in a blessed, really position, and even the other people's lives have changed because of this. Not just myself and like my wife. Just the people that we have working with us, and especially the other creatives. Like when you look at Gabe Taib and Cliff Richards, who did our artwork, these are former DC guys. These are former Marvel guys who are able to be proud of their work. You know what I mean? And I love being in that position to be able to offer them good commissions, man.
You're the best.
I'm trying.
God bless. Thank you. Back in a minute. The free market is really at its best when you're not necessarily doing what you love. You're doing what you love, serving other people. Everything we've shown you today, there was a hole for it, and somebody stepped to the plate. All of society is trying to teach you and your kids, you can't do it. You need someone else. You don't. If you have an idea, we need you in the parallel economy. Live the American dream. From Dallas, good night.